What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you guys want to support the channel, you can click on that whatnot link in the description down below. You'll get a free $15 whenever you sign up and you'll be supporting the channel. Additionally, you can become a patron. Not only is that the best way to support the channel, but you'll get to vote for deck techs for me to cover on the channel. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons. Newsom, you rock. Now let's get into today's deck tech with Arna, and this girl's kind of crazy. You're going to double the amount of 1/1 counters on attacking creatures you control. You're going to create a token copy of the auras and equipment attached to them, and the board state's just going to get insane from there. Now, you could make a very strong version of this deck in any strategy you want to go. You could focus solely on the counters, you could focus solely on enchantments, and you could focus solely on equipment, and you're going to end up with a very powerful deck. The goal I wanted to achieve with this deck tech is utilizing every single part of this card. So we will be utilizing the counters, we're going to be utilizing the enchantments, and we're going to be utilizing the equipment. Now, the best way to really abuse the equipment portion of Arna is to use living weapons and 4 Mirrodin effects, because what's going to happen is you're going to create a token copy of that living weapon. It will briefly attach to the creature you had it already equipped to, but then it's just going to make its pest like always and equip itself to that. So you can essentially just get a token copy of Batterskull every single turn. We also have a lot of other very solid 4 Mirrodin and living weapon cards. Blade of Shared Souls is one of my favorite here because we have a lot of very broken targets for it. Ajani's Chosen, we have the new Ocelot Pride. This card is not going to be okay in this deck, and even copying something like a Doomwake Giant can keep all of our opponent's creatures off of the board. So that's going to be where we're getting our equipment strategy from when we're talking about using this commander. And then all of our auras are going to be the value engine that is really going to catapult us ahead. We have a lot of auras that draw us cards, a lot of auras that buff up our creatures, and that's going to be the core of the deck if we're not creating those living weapon creatures with our equipment. And then from there, we're just including a lot of creatures that shove counters on our entire board state. So if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. But before we do, I'd like to thank today's video sponsors, BetterHelp. We all go through some rough times in our life, and sometimes we don't have all the necessary tools to get out of those rough times. I myself am no exception. I found myself going through a pretty rough time last year and ended up reaching out to some professional help to get me through that situation, and I'm glad I did. Sometimes you just need an unbiased third party to shed some light on the situation and then help you through that situation and give you the tools you need to get through situations like that in the future. And that's where therapy and BetterHelp comes into play. They're kind of changing up the game as far as therapy is concerned as well. Before, you had to go try a bunch of therapists to see which ones jived with you, and you're out on all the money in between. But BetterHelp puts all the therapists in one area, and I'm just kind of surprised with how flexible they are and how they really try to cater to the individual when you're picking a therapist. You can sort by age, gender, walk of life, whether that be religion or anything else. It's just super customizable. That way you get the therapist that works perfectly for you. Another advantage to using BetterHelp is just how flexible the scheduling is. You can reach out to your therapist at any time and they're going to work around your busy schedule. So if any of this sounds attractive to you, you can use code DECKTECH at checkout or use the link down in the description to get 10% off your first month. Thank you, BetterHelp, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get into that deck tech. Let's kick it off by talking about the equipment portion of this deck, Nettlecyst. This card can snowball out of control very quickly in this deck. We're just going to keep getting massive pests, and with every Nettlecyst token we create, all of our pests with Nettlecyst on them are going to get bigger. Not to mention, we can equip a handful of these to our commander and just start killing people outright. Bitterbone, this one's not always the best because of that equip cost, but in this deck we don't care about equipping it to anything, so just making a lot of creatures with vigilance and lifelink that we can later buff up is going to be incredibly useful. Bitterthorn's Nissa's Animist is very powerful here. Once per turn, we're just creating another token that's going to net us a land whenever it attacks. We can get all of our basics on the battlefield using this strategy. Batterskull, again, extremely powerful here. We just get a 4/4 that has vigilance and lifelink. It's basically Batterbone on steroids, so that's going to be pretty solid for this strategy. Glimmerlens has 4 Mirrodin on it, which is basically living weapons, so every turn we get another Glimmerlens, so the card advantage is going going to get out of control very quickly with this. Blade of Shared Souls is kind of messed up in this deck because once per turn, we're basically going to get a token copy of our most broken creature on the battlefield. That could be anything from Ocelot Pride or Armored Sky Hunter, even something like Archons of Sun's Grace or Doomwake Giant is going to be very useful to copy every single turn. Kimba's Banner is another equipment that snowballs out of control very quickly, kind of like a Nettle Cyst but for creatures instead. Again, this is something we can equip onto Arna and start dealing lethal commander damage very easily. Citizen's Crowbar doesn't have Living Weapon or for Mirrodin, but it essentially works the exact same way. So every turn we're going to get another crowbar that we can then sacrifice to get rid of our opponent's key enchantments and artifacts. That's going to be pretty brutal to play against and very useful for us at the same time. Sword of the Animist is one of those equipments that we're not trying to do anything fancy with, but it's too good not to include. Just getting 1, then 2, then 3 lands can really catapult us ahead of our opponents in an Esper deck as far as ramp's concerned, and that's kind of funny to me. I'm also playing Stoneforge Mystic and Sword of Hearthenhome. Now, Sword of Hearthenhome does the powerful ramp thing, right? But more importantly, whenever Stoneforge Mystic enters the battlefield, we're always going to grab Sword of Hearthenhome. That way we can start blinking Stoneforge Mystic to tutor up any of our key equipment that we need at any time. And then what's cool about Stoneforge Mystic is we can just cheat it directly into play after that. Dowsing Dagger is actually going to be pretty messed up in this deck. Ever since March of the Machines, we're actually able to transform our tokens. So now whenever we deal damage with Dowsing Dagger, we're going to choose not to transform the original, but we're going to transform the token copy, netting us a land that taps for 3 mana every single turn. That's kind of insane to me. Staff of Titania, this is another one that can kind of just snowball out of control. We're going to get increasingly more forests, which is going to ramp us every single turn. And then additionally, it's just going to make the creature that this is equipped to even bigger every single turn. I'm kind of in love with these equipment that can snowball out of control in this deck. Nazgul Battle Mace, this one's kind of cool as well. We'll get increasingly more Annihilator, and then additionally, it's going to get harder and harder for them to pay that life, for them not to give us that permanent that they sacrificed. Assimilation Aegis is another really cool equipment in this deck. We're just going to exile all of our opponent's key pieces, and then we're turning our creatures into those permanents. Kind of insane, especially when we have a deck with a lot of useless 0/1s that just have a lot of equipment attached to them. Now we can turn those 0/1s into very meaningful creatures while hosing over our opponent's strategy. Moving on to the aura portion of this deck, we have Nerd Rage. This one is very solid card advantage, and then additionally, if we have enough cards in our hand, it's just going to make us some pretty massive creatures. Combat Research, again, some card advantage. That ward is going to start stacking and make it really hard for our opponents to remove our commander, which is probably what we're equipping this to. Crochet of Knowledge, just a solid little buff here and there, and then additionally we're going to get that card draw on ETB. Astral Wingspan, it looks like it's very expensive, but remember it has Convoke and we have a lot of creatures to tap down in this deck. And then additionally, it's another aura that's going to draw us a card on ETB, and then additionally it buffs our creatures up a little bit. That's kind of what we're looking for here. Staggering Insight, again, a little bit of buff, a little bit of card advantage. Sage's Reverie, this one's a huge buff and a ton of card advantage. It's going to get out of control very quickly, and you can kind of see where dealing combat or commander damage with our commander is going to be pretty viable in this deck. Songbird's Blessing, super solid here. We're going to dig through our library, find an aura card, put it on the battlefield, and then additionally we can just put it into our hand, which is notable because some of our aura cards do act as removal as well. Daybreak Coronet is kind of busted here. It's going to give us +3/+3 lifelink and vigilance, and all it is 2 mana. We just have to make sure we're putting it on a creature that already has an aura on it, which is not going to be hard at all in this deck. Light of Promise is another card that can easily make it to where we're dealing commander damage to an opponent. Remember, Arna triggers on attack, so if we equip this to Arna and then attack, we will get 2 Light of Promises on Arna. Then when Arna deals 4 combat damage, we're going to gain 4 life and put 8 1/1 counters on her. That's just not going to be okay. Demonic Embrace, just a solid aura card that we can cast from the graveyard. Additionally, it is another aura card that gives +3, so that's going to be super useful. All That Glitters, again, this is going to be a kill on sight aura for our opponents. It snowballs out of control, if not just wins us the game whenever we equip this to our commander. Oriomancer's Geist. Again, guys, I don't think I have to tell you, if we get this on our commander and start making token copies of it, it's not going to be very long before we are just outright killing players. Angelic Destiny, +4/+4 with that flying and first strike seems very solid here. Umbra Mystic, this one's just going to give all of our aura cards totem armor. Notably, that does stack, so if they try to remove our commander and it has 3 auras on it, we only have to remove one of the totem armor auras. They're not all going to get thrown off our commander at once. So that's going to make our board pretty hard to interact with, even in a board wipe scenario. It's kind of exile or bust for our opponents. Ajani's Chosen and Archon of Sun's Grace. These are perfect includes in this deck because they trigger on ETB, not cast, which is very important for our commander. So now whenever we just create a token copy of all of our auras, we're going to create a giant board state. And this again snowballs out of control very, very quickly. Endless Evil, another thing that just creates a token copy of our best creature. Putting this on Archon Sun's Grace or Ajani's Chosen, probably not okay. Saram and Mesa Enchantress along with Pearl Ear Imperial Advisor are going to be our card advantage engines of choice when it comes to casting those aura spells. I also like the affinity we get off of the advisor here. That's going to be incredibly useful. Doomwake Giant can just keep all of our opponent's creatures off the board indefinitely because again it triggers off of ETB, not cast. Not okay. Mantle of the Ancients is amazing here. If they wipe our entire board and everything ends up in the graveyard, all we have to do is equip this, attack, and everything comes back to the battlefield. This is really going to be a blowout card in this deck and can cause some insane board states out of nowhere right after a board wipe. Frogify, Imprisoned in the Moon, and Darksteel Mutations are our removal options of choice when we're looking at our aura package. Moving on, we're going to talk about the +1/+1 counter synergies and just overall good cards in this deck. Virtue of Loyalty is going to be super solid. We're just shoving one counter on all of our creatures every single turn, and then we get to double those as long as we attack. Drana, Liberator of Malakir, does exactly the same thing. Along with Felidar Retreat, this is very useful here. It can give our whole board vigilance, gives our whole board 1/1 counters, and it can generate a board in the early game. Cathar's Crusade, kind of hard to keep track of, but this is going to be insane in the deck, and you're going to make some massive creatures off of this. Halvar, God of Battle, is just going to give all of our creatures double strike because the majority of them are either equipped or have an enchantment on them. Armored Sky Hunters, amazing, digs us deep, it gets us equipment, it gets us auras, it's just a perfect card in this deck. Ocelot Pride, not okay here, just doubles every token we create every single turn. Adeline kind of seemed crazy here, she's massive and she's just going to make a massive board state. Black Market Connections also seemed pretty good here. Since our commander does have lifelink and we're going to be buffing our commander up, we can full send this every single turn and not feel bad about it, so why wouldn't we play it here? Arden's kind of amazing here. Again, this guy makes it easy for us to kill everybody with commander damage because we can just equip everything onto our commander and boom, someone's going to die. Damning Verdict, also pretty perfect in this deck since it's basically a one-sided board wipe. And then we are playing Clever Concealment in Galadriel's Dismissal. The phasing out mechanic is going to be perfect with 1/1 counters and our aura cards. If we phase out all of our creatures, all of the auras will phase out with them. So not only can we use these to protect our important aura cards, it can also protect all of our board state, and then they're going to phase back in with all of their counters, all of their auras, and all of their equipment still equipped onto them. These are very good cards in this deck. With that being said, guys, that brings us to the end of the video. Don't forget to like and comment if you love these deck techs. Shout out to my high contributing patrons, Newsome, Praetor, Excessum, and Chicken Salad. You guys are amazing. I hope this helped you guys in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.